control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today we're talking about an episode of The Night Gallery. This is Season 3, Episode 11. It first aired on January the 14th, 1973, and it's, as is typical for Season 3, it's a single story. This one's called Something in the Woodwork, written by Rod Serling piece of work, and directed by Edward M. Abrams. Who I think this was like his second or third year of sort of trying his hand at directing, and his comments about this episode is reflecting back on it when he was older. He was saying, "Yeah, I definitely wouldn't do artsy-fartsy things like I did in this one." But you know, he's a learning director. A lot of new directors try all sorts of shots. They're learning their art, so that's fair enough. And I can't say it detracted from the episode in any way. I thought it was fun. And the way it's directed, and I particularly like there's some handheld stuff in this that kind of reminds you of, you know, found footage kind of vibe. What do they call it? Cinema verite, like moving up staircases and things like that. There's some cool stuff. So Rod Serling introduced this as he usually does. The intro's a bit clunky, to be honest. And given he'd written the story, I assumed he wrote this opening text, but yeah, it's okay. This one stars Geraldine Page, who's already been in a few episodes we've discussed. Does a pretty good turn here. In fact, she carries this episode pretty much. She's in every scene. There's 5 actors in all, but 2 of them are barely in it. One's a sort of young woman who's with her ex-husband, doesn't really have much dialogue. A little. There's a handyman at the beginning who has a reasonable amount of dialogue, but he's only in it in the first scene, really. And then we have the ghost guy, who you see him a bit, you hear him a bit, you know, it's like that. But really, it's Geraldine Page's piece of work. And the other main actor is the man playing her husband, who's Leif Erikson, a fairly familiar face from sort of 60s TV, 50s and 60s TV. He's fairly old at this point, but you know, he's playing her husband. She plays a character called Molly, and Leif Erikson's character is Charlie, called Wheatland. We do find out in the opening scene she's talking to a handyman, and she's clearly had a few to drink. She's almost flirty. It's hard to tell, and you can see the handyman is quite uncomfortable because she's saying, "Oh, stay, have a drink, have a cookie. You've got to keep your energy up," you know. There's some implications there, I think. And she's asked him if he's done this job, that job, and he says yes. He goes, and then she tells him she wants him to remove a lock of a certain attic door, and he's saying, "I don't think you need to do that." He's reluctant, and she explains why. There was a man was, I think it was a bank heist, was chased upstairs and killed in the attic, and for that reason, everyone's considered the house haunted, or whatever reasons the house has been considered haunted and unsellable for 30 years. She's bought it for a tiny amount relative to what the product, because she's not bothered about haunting the house. And there's also this mention that she's just not afraid of anything. She just mentions that quite a few times, actually. Anyway, he does go up and do the lot for and then leaves. She goes up and starts talking. She does actually discover a ghost, but this ghost is a very reluctant ghost. He's like really miserable, doesn't want to be, just wants to be left alone. It's kind of almost levels of Marvin the Paranoid Android from Hitchhiker's of miserable. Leave me alone. He talks a bit like Lurch. Lurch is sort of a touchstone, I think, from the Addams Family. He's kind of got a monotone voice, which I think serves the story later. There's a sort of revelation later. And this will be a spoiler-filled episode, by the way. So if you do want to go and see it, go away and watch it now. Quite liked it. I thought it was kind of fun. It was a little padded to fill the time. The story could have been done in 15 minutes rather than sort of 24, I'd say, but such is life. Her husband does come and visit, and she talks about him staying for a birthday celebration. He says he's got to go, and he's got a young girl in the car who's obviously his new partner, because she's saying things, you've given her 15 years of your life and alimony, what else do you owe her? And he's like, Charlie is quite concerned about her, but she talks about she's got someone up in the attic. She's got her own friends up in the attic, and he thinks she's got off the deep end, which she kind of has, I guess. And says he will come back later. And she basically goes up and talks to the ghost, and she sort of says, "Oh yeah, there's also some dialogue with the young girl who talks about it. She even." Where she says she even gave you a heart condition. So we find out Charlie's got a heart condition, and indeed, when she goes up and talks to the reluctant ghost, who doesn't want anything to do with anything, he says, just leave me alone. She goes, okay, if you ain't going to do what I'm asking, I'm going to burn the house down, and then will your eternal soul be? The ghost is perturbed and kind of goes along with it. We see some interesting shots, don't quite work, of the ghost kind of there and not there. We also see his reflection in a bottle, but he's got a weird half black, half white face. It reminded me a bit of that Star Trek episode with the race of half white, half black humanoids. It looked a bit like that. It's a bit goofy. And then she goes up and looks at the bottle. We see her in the bottle. There's kind of an intimation. There's a mix in there or something. Maybe that's very low. I wouldn't even call it subtext. It's even lower than that. But he kind of, you get the impression he reluctantly agrees. Anyway, Charlie does come back, goes upstairs after some cajoling. Aren't you man enough? All that kind of stuff. Geraldine Page is delivering here. She's really going to tell. Now, apparently Geraldine Page could be quite difficult to work with. She was a method actor. So directors had a hard time with that, and this was a fairly new director, this guy, as I mentioned, Edward, and he heard about this and was not looking forward to it, so he thought the best thing he could do, he approached her and he said something like, I think I know what I'm doing, but I'm fairly new to this, Miss Page. I'm happy to take any suggestions you have. And she was like, no, that's fine. You do your thing. All I'll worry about is my makeup and wardrobe. And apparently she was great. Probably a good way to approach us. Pretend, don't pretend you know stuff you don't. Be honest, and it kind of seemed to have worked in this case. So the shoot went perfectly well. And like I say, I like some of the camera work in this and some of the work he was doing. The script felt a little padded for what it was doing, but it served all right, and Geraldine Page was very watchable in this. Leif Erikson's always quite good. I should have mentioned, I don't think I mentioned this, it was based on an existing story called Housebound by R. Chetwynd Hayes. Not a name I'm familiar with, but it was based on an existing story, and written up and modified, probably quite drastically, knowing Serling. He often does it. He's got a very televisual sort of way of doing things. It's interesting how he brings out the conflict between the ex-husband and ex-wife as well. She's obviously not over it at all. She's probably desperately lonely, and or something like that. But she's revenge. Her mind has turned to revenge rather than sadness. It seems like. Anyway, it does end with him going upstairs, and we hear a shout and a body hit the floor, so she thinks he's dead. But then suddenly we see him come downstairs, but he's walking in a fairly jarring way. He looks very pale, and when he talks with that monotone voice of the ghost. Obviously, his body has been possessed by the ghost, and some of the dialogue after that sort of indicates this. And I like the parting shot. He basically says, "You should have left me alone. There was peace in the woodwork." This ghost just wanted peace and wasn't being given his peace. And then it ends with her screaming, which kind of belies the fact she was saying she's not scared of anything. But anyway, such is life. And it fades out. So it was, I'd say, a middling one for season 3. It wasn't terrible. And I like the camera work and direction. And Geraldine Page was selling it, and as was the Handyman. I have to say the Handyman did some good work here. So overall, not a bad episode at all for mid to late season 3. So I think I will stop there. But before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
We're not.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to